A skilled longbowman could shoot several arrows while an early gunner was still reloading. The bow produced no flash that revealed his position. No cloud of powder smoke obscured his target. And unlike an early firearm, it did not depend on a burning match, loose powder, or a complicated loading procedure. On a wet battlefield, the comparison could look even worse. A damp bowstring could be replaced or protected. Wet gunpowder could leave a firearm completely useless. Yet across Europe, armies gradually reduced the number of archers and replaced them with soldiers carrying guns. The change was not immediate. Bows, crossbows, handguns, and pikes continued to appear together for generations. But the direction was clear. The weapon that fired more slowly was spreading. The weapon that seemed simpler, quieter, and faster was disappearing. So why would armies make that choice? The usual answer is that the gun was more powerful. That mattered. But power alone does not explain why an entire military system changed. To understand what happened, we first have to stop comparing the weapons and look at the men carrying them. A war bow was not simply a wooden weapon handed to a new recruit. The archer himself was part of the weapon. Drawing a powerful longbow demanded strength developed through years of repetition. The movement had to become natural. The archer had to judge distance, maintain his rhythm, and release his arrows while men were moving, horses were approaching, and the battlefield was disappearing behind dust and smoke. In England, archery practice was encouraged from childhood because capable military archers could not be produced quickly. Evidence from the wreck of the Mary Rose shows just how specialized these men could become. The ship carried large numbers of war bows, and some skeletons recovered from it displayed physical changes associated with repeated heavy archery. A trained bowman was therefore extremely valuable. But that value created a weakness. If an army lost 1,000 experienced archers, it could not replace them with 1,000 farmers after several weeks of drill. The supply of bows could be increased. The supply of expert bowmen could not. And European armies were beginning to need far more soldiers than the older military system could reliably provide. Early handguns did not immediately solve every problem. For much of this transition, the weapons were not yet the familiar flintlock muskets of the 18th century. They included crude handguns, matchlock arquebuses, and later heavier muskets. They were slow to load. They were vulnerable to bad weather. Their smoke could hide both the enemy and the men firing. The gunner also carried powder, shot, a match, and other equipment that could fail at the worst possible moment. And although later smoothbore muskets could be fired rapidly by trained troops, the earlier weapons were far slower. But the gun possessed one advantage that the bow could never fully copy. Its power did not come from the soldier's muscles. The archer had to store energy by drawing the bow. The gunner released energy stored in gunpowder. That meant the firearm could continue becoming more powerful without requiring generations of increasingly strong soldiers. At close and useful battlefield ranges, heavy lead balls could damage armor and produce devastating wounds. The gun was still an awkward weapon, but it gave an ordinary soldier access to violence that had previously demanded exceptional strength and lifelong practice. Still, even this does not fully explain the disappearance of the bow. An inaccurate gun in untrained hands was not automatically better than an experienced archer. The decisive comparison was larger than one soldier against another. Imagine a contest between two men. One is an experienced longbowman. The other has received only basic training with an early firearm. The archer may shoot first. He may shoot more often. At some distances, he may also place his shots more consistently. If that were the only test, the bow might appear to be the better weapon. But rulers did not need to win a contest between two men. They needed to raise armies. They needed thousands of soldiers who could load together, fire together, march together, and obey the same commands. The individual gunner did require training. Loading a matchlock safely in formation was not effortless. Soldiers had to manage burning matches and loose powder without setting themselves or their neighbors on fire. They also needed repeated group drill if they were to maintain organized fire. But they did not have to reshape their bodies from childhood before they could use the weapon effectively. A government could recruit men, teach them a standard sequence of movements, and place them into a formation. The result might not be a master marksman. It did not need to be. Against a large body of enemy troops, coordinated fire mattered more than the perfection of every individual shot. The gun became more important as armies became larger and states became better at raising money, manufacturing equipment, and organizing supplies. This favored weapons that could be standardized. Powder and lead could be transported in bulk. Loading procedures could be written down. Officers could drill large groups to perform the same actions together. And when men were lost, new recruits could be inserted into the system. At first, gunners still needed protection from cavalry in close combat. That protection was often provided by pikemen. The firearm and the pike therefore worked together. One attacked at a distance. The other protected the formation while the guns were being reloaded. Later, the bayonet allowed the same soldier to carry both a firearm and a weapon capable of resisting an enemy at close range. The first plug bayonets blocked the muzzle, preventing the musket from firing once they were fitted. Socket bayonets solved much of that problem by attaching around the barrel. As this system improved, separate bodies of pikemen became less necessary. The firearm was no longer merely replacing the bow. It was helping create a new kind of infantryman. One man could shoot, stand in formation, and present a bayonet when the enemy came close. The longbow did not suddenly become harmless. In the hands of an experienced archer, it remained fast, flexible, and deadly. Nor did early firearms immediately become accurate, reliable, or easy to use. The transition took generations because both systems had advantages. But the longbow depended on maintaining a culture that continuously produced skilled archers. The gun depended increasingly on workshops, drill, powder, and state organization. That difference became more important as warfare changed. A master bowman could be extremely difficult to defeat in an individual comparison, but an army could lose him only once. A gunner was easier to replace. His weapon could be manufactured in growing numbers. His actions could be standardized. And the force behind his projectile did not depend on muscles trained since childhood. That was the real competition. Not arrow against bullet. Not accuracy against power. Not even one archer against one musketeer. It was one military system against another. The musket did not defeat the longbow in a fair contest between two weapons. It replaced the kind of soldier the longbow required. The bow belonged to an army that had to cultivate its specialists over many years. The gun belonged to states that wanted to raise more troops, replace losses, and put destructive power into the hands of ordinary recruits. The longbow could fire faster, but the musket allowed armies to grow. And in the wars that followed, that advantage became harder and harder to overcome.